Amid the chaos of a crumbling kingdom and a ruthless queen's murderous ambitions, one woman's courage would safeguard a sacred promise and change the fate of an entire nation. Welcome to Mindful Musing, a journey with God. In today's video, we're embracing the comforting presence of God during life's hardest moments. If your soul is weary, you're in the right place. In the heart of Judah's darkest days, when the lineage of King David faced imminent extinction, a hero emerged, not a warrior or a king, but a woman of remarkable faith and bravery. Jehosheba, often overlooked in the annals of history, made a choice that would preserve God's covenant and protect the future of her people. This is the incredible story of how one act of selfless courage ensured the survival of the royal line and restored hope to a nation on the brink of despair. The streets of Judah trembled under the weight of fear and uncertainty. The death of King Ahaziah had left the kingdom vulnerable, its leadership thrown into disarray. In the absence of a rightful ruler, the throne of Judah, once a symbol of God's covenant with David, stood empty, its vacancy a dark omen of what was to come. In the palace, Athaliah, the mother of the late king, was consumed by ambition. As the daughter of the notorious King Ahab and Queen Jezebel of Israel, Athaliah's thirst for power was insatiable. Her reign would be one of destruction, marked not by preservation but by elimination. Unwilling to share authority, she orchestrated a gruesome purge, ensuring her position as queen by ordering the systematic slaughter of the royal family. Princes, nephews, and potential heirs, all fell victim to her murderous decree. The Davidic lineage, the sacred bloodline through which God had promised to bring forth a ruler, now faced extinction. Athaliah's ruthless actions threatened to erase not only Judah's monarchy but also God's covenant with his people. Fear gripped the hearts of the palace servants and citizens alike as Athaliah's soldiers swept through the halls, their swords striking down any who bore ties to the throne. Outside the palace walls, the people of Judah lamented their plight. They had endured foreign invasions, political unrest, and spiritual decline, but the massacre of the royal family marked a new depth of despair. The hope they had once placed in their leaders now lay shattered, their trust in God tested in ways they could scarcely endure. Though the streets of Jerusalem buzzed with hushed whispers and muted cries, a quiet determination began to stir among those who remained loyal to the Lord. Among the shadows of chaos, there were still those who clung to faith, individuals who refused to abandon the promise of God's enduring covenant. In the heart of the palace, Jehosheba stood apart from the carnage. The sister of King Ahaziah and daughter of King Jehoram, Jehosheba was a woman of deep faith and quiet strength. She watched in horror as Athaliah's soldiers carried out their brutal orders, her heart aching for the innocent lives lost in the name of power. Yet amidst the grief, Jehosheba felt the stirring of a divine purpose, a call to action that would require her courage and faith. Jehosheba knew the stakes. If Athaliah's plan succeeded, the Davidic line would be extinguished, and Judah's future would be plunged into darkness. But Jehosheba also knew the promises of the Lord, that he would never abandon his people or forsake his covenant. It was this faith, unyielding in the face of terror, that would drive her to act. The kingdom was in chaos, but Jehosheba would not falter. She made a choice that would defy the darkness and preserve the light. Her resolve marked the beginning of a daring act that would change the course of Judah's history forever. In the tumultuous halls of the royal palace, Jehosheba's footsteps echoed softly, weaving through a labyrinth of danger and despair. To an outsider, she might have seemed just another member of the beleaguered royal family, a princess of Judah grieving the loss of her brother and the brutal decimation of her kin. But inside her, a storm raged, tempered only by an unwavering faith in the Lord and a profound sense of responsibility. Jehosheba was no ordinary royal. She was a woman with a mission, chosen by God to preserve his promise and ensure the survival of Judah's future. Jehosheba's origins were steeped in conflict. Born into the royal line, she grew up witnessing the sharp contrasts of leadership, those who followed the Lord and those who turned away. Her father, King Jehoram, had brought spiritual ruin to Judah by aligning himself with Athaliah, a woman of relentless ambition and ruthless control. Athaliah's influence in the palace had poisoned the moral fabric of the kingdom, fostering idolatry and rebellion against God. Jehosheba, however, remained steadfast, a beacon of quiet strength and unyielding faith amidst the darkness. The moment of Athaliah's coup was seared into Jehoshaba's memory, a day when the royal palace transformed from a sanctuary of governance into a theater of carnage. Soldiers roamed the halls, their swords gleaming as they carried out Athaliah's decree to annihilate every possible heir to the throne. Princes and noble children, unsuspecting and innocent, were dragged from their chambers, their cries echoing through the corridors like a tragic lament. Servants fled in terror, while the walls seemed to groan beneath the weight of unspeakable injustice. Jehosheba could have succumbed to fear. She could have hidden in her chambers, praying for protection while the bloodshed unfolded around her. But the whispers of God's promise, the covenant with David that his lineage would endure forever, rang louder in her heart than the cries of despair. Jehosheba knew she could not stand idly by. She had to act, even if it meant risking everything. Her opportunity came in the form of a child, a tiny, helpless infant named Josh, who had been born into the royal line shortly before the massacre began. Josh was the son of King Ahaziah, the last rightful ruler before Athaliah's coup, and one of the few remaining heirs to David's lineage. His very existence was a threat to Athaliah's rule, and his life hung by the thinnest of threads. Jehosheba had been alerted to Josh's presence by his nurse, a loyal servant who had managed to keep him hidden during the initial wave of violence. Together, they devised a plan to rescue the child before Athaliah's soldiers could discover him. It was a plan fraught with danger, requiring meticulous precision and unwavering resolve. Under the cover of night, Jehosheba made her way to the chamber where Josh was concealed. The palace was eerily silent, its halls haunted by the aftermath of the massacre. Torchlight flickered dimly, casting ominous shadows that seemed to stretch like grasping hands. Jehoshaba's heart pounded as she approached the door, each step measured and deliberate. She knew that any sound, any misstep, could lead to her discovery and the child's death. When she entered the chamber, the sight of Josh nearly brought her to tears. He was so small, so fragile, his innocent eyes unaware of the danger that surrounded him. The nurse, standing nearby, looked to Jehosheba with a mixture of hope and desperation. "We must hurry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Athaliah's guards will return soon." Jehosheba nodded, her resolve hardening. She wrapped the child in a bundle of cloth, cradling him close to her chest as she prepared to make her escape. The nurse followed, her steps faltering but her determination unwavering. Together, they navigated the darkened corridors, their movements silent yet purposeful. Jehoshaba's destination was the temple of the Lord, a sacred sanctuary that Athaliah had largely avoided due to her disdain for the worship of God. The temple, overseen by Jehoshaba's husband, Jehoiada the high priest, offered a haven where Josh could be hidden and protected. It was a place of holiness and refuge, standing in stark contrast to the blood-stained halls of the palace. The journey to the temple was fraught with peril. Jehosheba and the nurse encountered several close calls, narrowly avoiding patrols of Athaliah's guards who roamed the grounds in search of survivors. At one point, they were forced to hide behind a stack of crates as two soldiers passed mere feet away, their voices gruff and indifferent as they discussed the success of the purge. Jehosheba held her breath, clutching Josh tightly, her prayers silent but fervent. When she entered the chamber, the sight of Josh nearly brought her to tears. He was so small, so fragile, his innocent eyes unaware of the danger that surrounded him. The nurse, standing nearby, looked to Jehosheba with a mixture of hope and desperation. "We must hurry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Athaliah's guards will return soon." Jehosheba nodded, her resolve hardening. She wrapped the child in a bundle of cloth, cradling him close to her chest as she prepared to make her escape. The nurse followed, her steps faltering but her determination unwavering. Together, they navigated the darkened corridors, their movements silent yet purposeful. Jehoshaba's destination was the temple of the Lord, a sacred sanctuary that Athaliah had largely avoided due to her disdain for the worship of God. The temple, overseen by Jehoshaba's husband, Jehoiada the high priest, offered a haven where Josh could be hidden and protected. It was a place of holiness and refuge, standing in stark contrast to the blood-stained halls of the palace. The journey to the temple was fraught with peril. Jehosheba and the nurse encountered several close calls, narrowly avoiding patrols of Athaliah's guards who roamed the grounds in search of survivors. At one point, they were forced to hide behind a stack of crates as two soldiers passed mere feet away, their voices gruff and indifferent as they discussed the success of the purge. Jehosheba held her breath, clutching Joash tightly, her prayers silent but fervent. When they finally reached the temple, Jehosheba felt a wave of relief wash over her. The sight of the towering sanctuary, illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight, filled her with a renewed sense of hope. She approached the entrance, where Jehoiada awaited with a solemn expression. "Is this him?" he asked softly, his eyes scanning the bundle in Jehosheba's arms. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "This is Joash, the last son of Ahaziah and the rightful heir to the throne." Jehoiada nodded, his expression shifting to one of determination. "Then we will protect him with everything we have," he said. "The Lord's covenant will not be broken." In the days that followed, Joash was hidden within the temple, his presence known only to a select few who shared Jehosheba's faith and resolve. The child was cared for with tenderness and vigilance, his every need met by those who had pledged their lives to his protection. Jehosheba visited him often, her prayers a constant source of comfort and strength. She knew that her actions had placed her in direct opposition to Athaliah, but she also knew that the Lord was with her. Jehosheba's courage was not born of recklessness, it was rooted in faith. She understood the magnitude of her mission and the risks it entailed, but she also trusted in the promises of God. Her decision to rescue Joash was not merely an act of defiance against Athaliah, it was an affirmation of the Lord's sovereignty and the enduring power of his covenant. Over time, the story of Jehosheba's bravery began to circulate among the people of Judah. Though they did not know the details of her actions, they felt the stirrings of hope, a sense that the darkness of Athaliah's reign might one day be lifted. Jehosheba's resolve became a quiet but powerful beacon, inspiring others to cling to their faith and wait for the day when justice would prevail. Jehosheba's act of courage was not just the rescue of a child, it was the preservation of a promise. Through her bravery, the Davidic lineage was safeguarded, and the foundation was laid for the eventual restoration of Judah's monarchy. Her faith and determination proved that even in the darkest of times, God's light shines through those who are willing to trust in Him. The palace of Judah was silent in the dead of night, save for the occasional shuffle of footsteps from Athaliah's guards patrolling the corridors. The flickering torches along the stone walls cast long shadows, each movement a potential threat to anyone who dared defy the new queen's reign. Amidst the darkness, a single room remained untouched by the torch's glow, as if to shield its occupant from the eyes of Athaliah's relentless soldiers. In that room, cradled by his nurse, lay Joash, the last living heir to the throne of David, blissfully unaware of the peril that surrounded him. Jehosheba stood by the chamber door, her heart hammering in her chest. She had spent countless hours hidden in the palace's quieter corners, praying for clarity and courage. As she watched the nurse tend to Joash, her resolve hardened. The infant, so small and innocent, was oblivious to the bloodshed that had claimed his family. Yet, through his veins coursed the royal blood of David, God's promise embodied in his fragile form. His survival was not only vital to the future of Judah but also to the fulfillment of God's covenant. Jehosheba knew that time was running out. Athaliah's soldiers would soon search every last corner of the palace. "Are you ready?" Jehosheba asked the nurse, her voice low and steady despite the tempest within her. The nurse, an older woman with kind but weary eyes, nodded as she wrapped Joash in a swaddle of cloth to protect him from the chill of the night air. "Yes, my lady," she whispered. "But the path to the temple is fraught with danger. If they find us—" Jehosheba placed a hand on the woman's arm, silencing her doubts. "The Lord will guide our steps," she said firmly. "We must trust in Him." The temple of the Lord, their destination, was a sacred sanctuary located on the outskirts of the palace grounds. It was a place Athaliah rarely ventured, for her allegiance lay with the pagan idols of her mother Jezebel. Jehosheba's husband, Jehoiada, served as the high priest there, and it was the only place she believed could offer refuge to Joash. The temple's priests and Levites were loyal to the Lord and would protect the child with their lives if necessary. Still, the journey would be perilous. Jehosheba gathered her cloak, pulling the hood over her head to shield her face. With Joash nestled securely in the nurse's arms, they slipped out of the room and into the dimly lit corridors. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat. Jehosheba's ears strained for any sound, the clink of armor, the murmur of voices, but the only noise came from their soft, careful footsteps. The palace's labyrinthine design worked to their advantage, allowing them to avoid the main passageways where guards were stationed. Jehosheba's intimate knowledge of the palace, gained through years of navigating its halls, guided them through hidden routes and servants' quarters. Yet, her heart clenched with every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of torchlight that danced too close. As they descended a narrow staircase leading to the lower levels of the palace, they encountered their first obstacle. Two guards stood at the base of the stairs, their backs turned as they conversed in hushed tones. Jehosheba motioned for the nurse to stop, pressing herself against the cold stone wall. Her mind raced, calculating their options. Confrontation was not an option, they were unarmed and outnumbered. Instead, she scanned the area, searching for a distraction. A small pile of pottery lay nearby, remnants of a servant's hasty cleaning. Jehosheba picked up a shard and threw it toward the far corner of the room, where it shattered with a sharp crack. The guards turned at once, their attention drawn to the noise. "What was that?" one of them muttered, moving cautiously toward the source. The other followed, their focus momentarily diverted. Seizing the opportunity, Jehosheba and the nurse hurried past, their movements swift and silent. The baby stirred in the nurse's arms, letting out a soft whimper. Jehosheba froze, her breath caught in her throat, but the guards remained oblivious, too preoccupied with investigating the noise. She silently prayed for God's protection as they continued on their way. The exit leading to the temple grounds was just ahead, but it was heavily guarded, a pair of soldiers stationed by the door, their armor gleaming in the torchlight. Jehosheba's heart sank. There was no way to sneak past them unnoticed. The nurse looked to her, fear etched across her face. "What do we do?" she whispered. Jehosheba inhaled deeply, her mind racing for a solution. The Lord had guided them this far, he would not abandon them now. She noticed a servant's cart nearby, laden with firewood for the palace kitchens. An idea began to form. "Wait here," she instructed the nurse, setting off toward the cart. She approached the guards with a feigned air of authority, her hood pulled low to conceal her face. "The queen requires additional wood for the council chamber," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Move the cart inside and make it quick." The guards exchanged a glance, clearly annoyed but unwilling to question an order that might have come from Athaliah herself. As they turned their backs to move the cart, Jehosheba signaled to the nurse. Together, they slipped through the door and into the night. The temple grounds lay shrouded in darkness, the moon their only guide as they hurried toward the sanctuary. The chill of the night air bit at their skin, but Jehosheba felt a surge of relief. They had escaped the palace, but their journey was far from over. The temple, though close, was still a vulnerable target if Athaliah's soldiers decided to pursue them. As they approached the temple entrance, Jehosheba saw the faint outline of Jehoiada waiting for them. The high priest's figure, stoic and resolute, was a sight that filled her with both comfort and urgency. "You've done it," Jehoiada whispered as he helped them inside, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. Jehosheba handed Joash to Jehoiada, her hands trembling from the adrenaline of the escape. "He is the last," she said, her voice breaking. "If Athaliah finds out." "She won't," Jehoiada assured her, his voice firm. "The temple is holy ground. The Lord will protect us." The temple's inner chambers, tucked away from prying eyes, became Josh's refuge. The priests and Levites swore an oath to guard the child, their loyalty to the Lord and the Davidic line unwavering. Jehosheba and Jehoiada worked tirelessly to ensure his safety, devising ways to keep his presence a secret even from those within the temple. Over the following days, weeks, and months, Joash grew under the watchful eyes of his protectors. Jehosheba visited often, her heart swelling with both love and a sense of divine purpose. She knew that her actions had placed her life in jeopardy, but she also knew that the survival of Joash was worth any cost. Through him, God's promise to David would endure. The temple, a place of worship and devotion, became a symbol of hope for Judah. Though Athaliah's reign continued, her influence did not extend to the sacred sanctuary. The priest's prayers echoed through the halls, a constant reminder of God's presence even in the darkest of times. Jehoshaba's courage had preserved not only a child but the very future of a nation. Her faith, her determination, and her unwavering trust in the Lord had set in motion a plan that would one day restore the Davidic throne. For now, though, she remained in the shadows, content to watch over the young king who would one day lead Judah out of its darkness. Within the sacred walls of the temple of the Lord, time seemed to flow differently. The hurried, dangerous escape from the palace had faded into memory, though its echoes remained in the hearts of those who had carried it out. For Jehosheba, every breath spent within the temple was both a prayer of gratitude and a plea for protection. She had saved Joash, the last living heir to the throne of David, but her mission was far from over. Now, she and her husband, Jehoiada, faced the daunting task of raising and protecting the child while keeping his existence hidden from the ever-watchful eyes of Athaliah. The temple became Joash's sanctuary, a fortress of faith and secrecy. Its towering columns and holy altars, steeped in centuries of devotion, now served as the backdrop for the survival of Judah's future king. Here, amidst the chants of priests and the scent of burning incense, Joash was nurtured and prepared for the role he was destined to fulfill. But hiding an heir to the throne was no simple feat, and every day brought new challenges. Athaliah's reign was marked by fear and paranoia. Though she believed the royal family had been entirely eliminated, she maintained a tight grip on the kingdom, her spies and soldiers ever watchful for dissent. Rumors occasionally surfaced, whispers of a child who had escaped the massacre, but they were swiftly silenced, dismissed as the desperate hopes of a people yearning for deliverance. Still, Jehosheba knew better than to underestimate Athaliah. The queen's wrath, should she discover Joash's survival, would be relentless. To ensure the child's safety, Jehosheba and Jehoiada imposed strict rules. Only a select few within the temple, trusted priests and Levites who had sworn loyalty to the Lord, were aware of Joash's presence. His chambers were hidden deep within the temple, accessible only through a series of concealed passages known to the priests. Supplies were brought to him under the guise of temple rituals, and his nurse remained by his side, providing comfort and care. Jehosheba herself took on many roles: protector, educator, and mother figure. Though Joash was not her biological child, she loved him as if he were her own. She spent hours by his side, teaching him about his lineage, the covenant with David, and the responsibilities that would one day fall upon his shoulders. "You are chosen by God," she often reminded him, her voice filled with both tenderness and conviction. "You carry the hope of our people. Never forget who you are." Life in hiding was fraught with tension. Every sound outside the temple walls, a sudden knock, the clatter of hooves, sent waves of anxiety through those who guarded Joash. On more than one occasion, Athaliah's soldiers came dangerously close to uncovering the truth. Once, a patrol arrived at the temple, claiming to investigate reports of a hidden child. Jehoiada met them with calm authority, his priestly robes lending him an air of untouchable sanctity. "The temple is a house of worship, not a den of conspirators," Jehoiada said firmly, leading the soldiers through the outer chambers. He kept his expression neutral, even as his heart raced. The soldiers searched briefly but found nothing, their reverence for the temple preventing them from probing deeper. As they left, Jehoiada offered a prayer of thanks, knowing how narrowly they had escaped discovery. Jehosheba, too, faced moments of doubt. Though her faith in the Lord remained steadfast, the burden of secrecy weighed heavily on her. There were nights when she lay awake, her mind filled with what-ifs. What if they were discovered? What if Joshua's cries reached the wrong ears? Yet, in those moments of doubt, she turned to prayer, drawing strength from the God who had guided her thus far. Despite the constant vigilance, life within the temple was not without its joys. Josh grew into a curious and intelligent child, his laughter echoing softly through the hidden chambers. Jehosheba took comfort in watching him thrive, his innocence a stark contrast to the violence that had threatened his life. He had a natural affinity for learning, soaking up the lessons Jehosheba and Jehoiada imparted with enthusiasm. Jehoiada often spoke to him about the laws of God, the history of Judah, and the role of a king as a servant of the Lord. A true king rules not for his own gain, but for the welfare of his people, Jehoiada said one evening, his voice steady and measured. Never forget that your authority comes from the Lord. Honor him in all that you do. Josh listened intently, his young mind absorbing the wisdom of his mentors. Though he did not fully understand the weight of his destiny, he felt the love and care of those around him, and it shaped him into a compassionate and thoughtful child. As the years passed, the temple became more than a refuge, it became a center of quiet resistance against Athaliah's rule. Jehoiada worked tirelessly to rally the faithful, strengthening the bonds between the priests, Levites, and the people of Judah. He spoke of the Lord's covenant and the promise of a righteous king who would restore justice to the land. Though he could not reveal Joshua's existence, his words inspired hope in those who longed for deliverance. Jehosheba played her part as well, reaching out to trusted allies and ensuring that the temple remained a haven for those loyal to the Lord. She moved carefully, balancing her public duties with her private mission, always mindful of the risk. Through it all, Jehosheba's love for Josh never wavered. She bore the weight of her choices with grace, knowing that her actions had ensured the survival of the Davidic line. Yet, there were moments when the sacrifices she had made became painfully clear. She had given up the comfort of palace life, distanced herself from those she loved, and lived under the constant shadow of danger, all for the sake of a child who was not her own. But Jehosheba did not see her sacrifices as burdens. To her, they were acts of faith, expressions of her unwavering trust in the Lord's plan. She found strength in the knowledge that she was fulfilling a divine purpose, protecting not only Josh but also the promise of God's enduring covenant. For 6 years, the temple remained a sanctuary, its walls shielding Josh from the chaos of Athaliah's reign. The child grew under the watchful eyes of his protectors, his innocence preserved even as he was prepared for the weight of leadership. Jehosheba and Jehoiada poured their hearts into raising him, their love and faith shaping him into a boy who carried the hopes of a nation. Outside the temple, Judah languished under Athaliah's rule, its people yearning for a day when justice and righteousness would be restored. Whispers of rebellion grew louder, though few dared to act openly. The temple, however, stood as a quiet beacon of hope, a reminder that God's plans could not be thwarted by the schemes of men. As the 6th year approached, Jehosheba knew that the time for action was drawing near. Josh was no longer an infant, he was a boy who would soon take his place as Judah's rightful king. The years of hiding had been necessary, but the moment of restoration was at hand. With every passing day, Jehosheba's resolve deepened, her prayers growing more fervent. The story of Jehosheba and Josh was not just one of survival, it was a testament to faith, courage, and the power of God's promises. Though the shadows of danger still loomed, the light of hope burned brighter than ever within the temple's sacred walls. 6 years had passed since the daring rescue of Josh, and the temple of the Lord had become a haven of hope and resilience. Hidden within its sacred walls, Josh was no longer the fragile infant who had been saved from the slaughter. He was now a boy of 7, bright-eyed and curious, imbued with a growing sense of purpose. His protectors, Jehosheba and Jehoiada, had raised him with a firm grounding in faith and the history of his people, preparing him for the destiny that awaited him. Outside the temple, Judah languished under Athaliah's oppressive rule. Her 6-year reign had been marked by idolatry and corruption, as she promoted the worship of Baal and desecrated the traditions of the Lord. The people of Judah, weary and disillusioned, longed for deliverance but feared the queen's wrath. Whispers of rebellion stirred among the faithful, yet none dared to act openly. The time for restoration had not yet come, but it was drawing near. Jehoiada, as the high priest, was both a spiritual leader and a man of strategic brilliance. Over the years, he had watched Joash grow and had seen in him the potential for righteous leadership. The boy, though young, carried himself with a quiet dignity that belied his age, a reflection of the Davidic heritage he embodied. Jehoiada knew that Joash's presence was not an accident but part of God's divine plan. The time had come to reveal him to the people of Judah and restore the rightful king to the throne. The plan for restoration was as daring as it was meticulous. Jehoiada began by reaching out to trusted leaders, captains of the army, priests, and Levites, who remained loyal to the Lord and the Davidic line. These men, though scattered and demoralized, were drawn together by their shared faith and longing for justice. In secret meetings within the temple, Jehoiada shared his vision, speaking with the authority of a man guided by divine purpose. "The Lord has preserved the line of David," Jehoiada declared, his voice resolute. "Joash, the son of Ahaziah, lives, hidden by his mercy. It is time to bring him forth, to anoint him as king and restore the covenant between God and his people." The men listened in rapt silence, their faces reflecting a mix of disbelief and hope. The idea of a living heir to the throne was almost too good to be true, yet Jehoiada's conviction left no room for doubt. Gradually, their initial hesitation gave way to determination. They pledged their loyalty to Joash and began preparing for the day when he would be revealed. Over the following weeks, Jehoiada coordinated a clandestine network of supporters. Messages were sent to the cities and villages surrounding Jerusalem, rallying the faithful to the cause. Priests and Levites were called to the temple under the guise of religious duties, while captains of the army were informed of the plan in strict confidence. Each man was carefully vetted, ensuring that no spies or traitors infiltrated their ranks. Jehosheba played a vital role in this effort, her natural charisma and quiet determination inspiring trust among those she encountered. Though her actions remained shrouded in secrecy, her influence extended far beyond the temple walls. She worked tirelessly, ensuring that supplies, weapons, and resources were in place for the coming confrontation. As the day of Joash's coronation drew near, the tension within the temple mounted. Jehoiada gathered the captains of the army and assigned them specific roles, dividing them into groups to guard the temple, the palace, and the key routes leading to the city. The priests and Levites were tasked with maintaining order within the temple grounds, ensuring that the sacred space remained inviolate. Joash, though young, was not shielded from the preparations. Jehoiada and Jehosheba spoke to him with honesty, explaining the weight of his heritage and the responsibilities he would soon bear. "You are the Lord's chosen servant," Jehoiada told him one evening as they knelt in prayer. "You will be king, not by the will of men, but by the will of God. Trust in him, and he will guide you." The boy listened intently, his expression solemn but determined. Though he was only 7, there was a wisdom in his eyes that reassured those around him. Joash understood that his life had been spared for a reason, and he was ready to step into the role he had been prepared for. At last, the day arrived. It was the Sabbath, a day of worship and rest, and the temple grounds were bustling with priests, Levites, and worshippers. Under the guise of religious observance, Jehoiada's supporters gathered in secret, their numbers growing with each passing hour. The temple, a symbol of faith and resilience, now became the staging ground for a divine coup. Jehoiada stood before the assembly, his voice ringing with authority. "Today, we will restore the throne of David and renew our covenant with the Lord," he proclaimed. "The Lord has preserved an heir, and we shall crown him king in his name." With that, Joash was brought forth, his young face framed by the weight of his destiny. The sight of the child, alive and well, sent a wave of emotion through the crowd. Many fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces as they praised the Lord for his faithfulness. Jehoiada took the crown and placed it upon Joash's head, anointing him with holy oil. "Long live the king," he declared, and the cry was taken up by the crowd, their voices rising like a mighty chorus. Trumpets sounded, their triumphant notes echoing through the temple and beyond. The sound of the trumpets reached the palace, where Athaliah sat in complacent ignorance. The queen's contentment was shattered as the noise grew louder, and she was informed of the commotion in the temple. Furious and alarmed, she gathered her guards and marched to the temple, her mind racing with thoughts of rebellion and treachery. As Athaliah entered the temple courtyard, the sight before her stopped her in her tracks. There, surrounded by priests and soldiers, stood Joash, the crown upon his head and the people cheering his name. The realization struck her like a blow: her reign, built on bloodshed and deceit, was crumbling before her eyes. "Treason," she screamed, her voice filled with rage and desperation. "Treason!" But her cries were drowned out by the jubilation of the crowd. Jehoiada stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is no treason, Athaliah. This is the will of the Lord. Your reign ends today." At his command, the guards seized Athaliah and led her away from the temple. She was executed outside its sacred grounds, her death marking the end of her tyrannical rule. With Athaliah's downfall, Judah was freed from her oppressive reign. Joash, though young, was recognized as the rightful king, and his coronation marked the beginning of a new chapter for the kingdom. Under the guidance of Jehoiada and Jehosheba, he began to rebuild the spiritual and moral foundations of Judah, leading his people back to the Lord. The day of restoration was not merely a political victory, it was a testament to the power of faith, courage, and divine providence. Jehoshaba's daring rescue and Jehoiada's unwavering leadership had preserved the Davidic line and fulfilled God's promise to his people. As the sun set over Jerusalem, its golden light bathing the city in warmth, the temple stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the Lord's plans cannot be thwarted. The crisp morning air carried a heavy sense of anticipation as the day of destiny dawned for the kingdom of Judah. Inside the temple of the Lord, the air was charged with reverence and tension, for this was the day when the rightful heir to the throne of David would be revealed to the people. Jehosheba and Jehoiada, having labored in secrecy for 6 long years, now stood on the precipice of restoring Judah's monarchy and renewing its covenant with the Lord. Joash, now 7 years old, had been carefully prepared for this day. Though still a child, he carried the weight of his heritage with remarkable composure. Jehosheba had spent countless hours telling him the stories of his ancestors, David, Solomon, and the kings who had come before him, instilling in him a sense of duty and faith. Jehoiada had taught him the laws of the Lord and the principles of righteous leadership, ensuring that he understood the divine purpose of his kingship. The temple's inner sanctum buzzed with quiet activity as the final preparations were made. Priests and Levites moved with purpose, their hearts filled with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The sacred crown, a symbol of the Davidic covenant, was brought out from its place of safekeeping, its gold gleaming in the soft light of the temple. The anointing oil, a sacred substance used to consecrate kings, was carefully prepared. Jehosheba stood by Joash, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She looked at him with a mixture of pride and love, marveling at how far they had come. "Today, you fulfill the promise of the Lord," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotions welling within her. "You are the king Judah has been waiting for." Joash nodded solemnly, his young face illuminated by both determination and innocence. Though he was still a boy, there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a reflection of the faith and resilience that had been nurtured within him. As the sun rose higher in the sky, people began to gather at the temple. Word had spread quietly among the faithful, and the temple courtyard filled with priests, Levites, and loyal captains who had pledged themselves to the cause. The crowd, though still small in number, was united by a shared longing for deliverance from the tyranny of Athaliah's reign. Jehoiada stood before the assembly, his commanding presence silencing the murmurs of the crowd. He raised his hands, calling for their attention. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "For too long, Judah has suffered under the rule of the wicked. But today, the Lord restores his covenant with David. Behold, the king whom he has preserved." At Jehoiada's signal, Joash was brought forth, accompanied by Jehosheba and a group of priests. The young boy stepped into view, his small stature belying the significance of his presence. The sight of him, alive, well, and bearing the unmistakable features of the royal line, drew gasps from the crowd. Many fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces as they realized the truth. The Davidic line had not been extinguished. The Lord had been faithful. Jehoiada approached Joash with the crown and anointing oil, the sacred objects carried with reverence. "This is the one whom the Lord has chosen," Jehoiada proclaimed. "He will reign in righteousness and lead Judah back to the path of the Lord." He placed the crown upon Joash's head, its weight a tangible reminder of the responsibility he was about to undertake. Then, taking the anointing oil, Jehoiada poured it over the boy's head, consecrating him as king in the sight of God and his people. "By the authority of the Lord God Almighty, I anoint you, Joash, king of Judah," Jehoiada declared. The priests and Levites erupted into a triumphant chorus, their voices rising in song and praise. Trumpets blared, their clear, jubilant notes carrying across the city. The crowd, overcome with emotion, shouted as one, "Long live the King! Long live the King!" The sound of the trumpets and the shouts of the crowd reached the ears of Athaliah, who was in her palace at the time. Startled and enraged, she demanded to know what was happening. When a messenger informed her of the commotion at the temple, she wasted no time in gathering her guards and marching toward the source of the noise. As she entered the temple courtyard, the scene before her filled her with both shock and fury. Joash stood on a platform, the crown upon his head and the people surrounding him in celebration. Athaliah's face twisted in rage as the realization dawned, she had been betrayed. The Davidic line, which she believed she had eradicated, had survived. "Treason," she screamed, her voice cutting through the jubilant atmosphere. "Treason! How dare you defy me?" The crowd parted as Jehoiada stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. "It is not treason to honor the covenant of the Lord," he said firmly. "Your reign, built on bloodshed and idolatry, ends today." Athaliah's guards hesitated, uncertain whether to act. The crowd, emboldened by Jehoiada's words and the presence of their rightful king, closed ranks around Joash. The tide had turned, and Athaliah's authority crumbled before her eyes. At Jehoiada's command, the guards loyal to Joash seized Athaliah and escorted her out of the temple grounds. She continued to shout and struggle, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The people of Judah had seen the truth, and their allegiance now lay with Joash. Athaliah was taken to the horse gate, a location outside the temple where justice was carried out. There, she met her end, her reign of terror brought to a fitting conclusion. Her death marked the end of an era of idolatry and oppression, paving the way for the restoration of Judah's spiritual and political integrity. With Athaliah's downfall, Jehoiada led the people in a ceremony of covenant renewal. Standing before the altar, he called upon the assembly to rededicate themselves to the Lord and his commandments. "This day, we reaffirm our faith in the Lord God of Israel," Jehoiada declared. "We will serve him with all our hearts and walk in his ways." The people responded with a resounding "Amen," their voices united in a pledge of loyalty to God and to their new king. The temple, once a place of quiet resistance, now became the center of a renewed national identity, a beacon of hope and faith for all of Judah. As the sun set over Jerusalem, its golden light bathing the city in warmth, Joash sat upon the throne of his ancestors. Though young, he carried himself with a dignity that inspired confidence in those around him. Jehosheba stood nearby, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but the Lord had been faithful. Under Jehoiada's guidance, Joash began the work of restoring Judah, dismantling the altars of Baal and re-establishing the worship of the Lord. The people, united by their shared faith and hope, rallied around their king, determined to build a future worthy of their God's promises. The streets of Jerusalem buzzed with murmurs as news of Joash's coronation spread like wildfire. It was a moment the people of Judah had long yearned for, deliverance from the oppressive reign of Athaliah, a ruler whose cruelty and idolatry had cast a shadow over the land. Within the temple, where the joyous ceremony had crowned Joash as king, the faithful gathered in unity, their faces alight with hope. But for Athaliah, the sound of trumpets ringing across the city was not a signal of celebration but of rebellion. The queen, ensconced in her palace, was gripped by fury and fear as she learned of the events unfolding. Her reign, built on bloodshed and manipulation, was unraveling before her eyes. Refusing to concede her throne, Athaliah rallied her guards and stormed toward the temple, determined to crush the uprising and reassert her dominance. Athaliah entered the temple courtyard with her soldiers in tow, her face twisted in rage. She pushed past the gathering of priests and Levites, her shouts piercing the air. "Treason," she screamed, her voice cutting through the jubilant chants of "Long live the King." Her sharp cry startled the crowd, but they quickly closed ranks around Joash, forming a protective barrier between the boy king and the queen. Jehosheba and Jehoiada stood calmly, their expressions resolute as Athaliah approached. Jehoiada stepped forward, his priestly robes billowing in the breeze as he faced the queen. "Athaliah," he said with measured authority, "your reign ends today. The Lord has preserved the line of David, and he restores his chosen king to the throne." Athaliah glared at him, her eyes narrowing. "You dare defy me?" she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You will pay for this insolence." But the crowd's allegiance was clear. Loyal captains of the army, priests, and Levites stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking Athaliah's path to Joash. Their determination, fueled by faith and hope, rendered her powerless. For the first time in her life, Athaliah faced a force she could not overpower. At Jehoiada's command, the guards loyal to Joash moved forward and seized Athaliah. Her soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to intervene against the growing tide of opposition. Sensing defeat, many of them abandoned her, leaving the queen isolated and vulnerable. She struggled and screamed, but her cries fell on deaf ears. Jehosheba watched the scene unfold with a mix of relief and solemnity. Though she bore no love for Athaliah, the sight of the queen's downfall was a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and rebellion against God. Jehosheba knew that justice must be carried out, not for vengeance, but to restore the kingdom to righteousness. Athaliah was escorted out of the temple grounds, her screams echoing as she was led away. The people of Judah followed at a distance, their curiosity mingled with satisfaction. They had suffered under her tyranny for too long, and her removal marked the end of an era of despair. Athaliah was taken to the horse gate of the palace, a location chosen deliberately to ensure that justice was administered away from the sacred grounds of the temple. There, her reign came to an unceremonious end. The queen who had risen to power through bloodshed met her demise, her death bringing closure to a dark chapter in Judah's history. The people of Judah, though relieved, did not linger in the shadow of her execution. Their focus shifted to the future, a future symbolized by the young king who now sat upon the throne. Athaliah's downfall was a moment of reckoning, but it was also the beginning of restoration. With Athaliah's death, Jehoiada led the people in a ceremony to renew their covenant with the Lord. The temple, once threatened by the queen's idolatrous practices, now stood as a beacon of faith and hope. Priests and Levites gathered before the altar, their voices rising in prayer and song. "We dedicate ourselves to the Lord God of Israel," Jehoiada proclaimed, his voice filled with conviction. "We will walk in his ways and honor his commandments. Let this day be a new beginning for Judah." The people responded with a resounding "Amen," their collective voice echoing through the temple courtyard. Jehosheba joined in the prayers, her heart swelling with gratitude. The years of secrecy and struggle had been worth every sacrifice, for the Lord's promises had been fulfilled. Joash's coronation was more than a political event, it was a spiritual renewal that marked the restoration of Judah's identity. Under Jehoiada's guidance, the young king began the work of dismantling the altars of Baal and re-establishing the worship of the Lord. The temple, once a place of quiet resistance, now became the center of Judah's spiritual life. Jehosheba continued to play a vital role, her influence extending beyond the walls of the temple. She worked tirelessly to support Joash, ensuring that he was surrounded by wise counsel and faithful allies. Though her role was often hidden from public view, her impact on the kingdom was immeasurable. The downfall of Athaliah and the rise of Joash were not merely historical events, they were a testament to the enduring power of God's covenant and the faithfulness of those who trusted in him. Jehosheba's courage, Jehoiada's leadership, and Joash's destiny had converged to bring about a moment of deliverance that would be remembered for generations. The dust of Athaliah's downfall had settled, and the city of Jerusalem entered a new era, bathed in the light of hope and renewal. The once bleak kingdom, overshadowed by fear and idolatry, now radiated with the promise of restoration. Judah was no longer ruled by the tyranny of bloodshed but by a king chosen by God, a boy whose survival had been nothing short of miraculous. Yet, as the people celebrated their newfound freedom, one quiet figure stood apart from the festivities, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Jehosheba, the unsung heroine of Judah's history, watched as the young King Joash ascended his throne. The people's cheers echoed through the temple grounds, their voices filled with gratitude and joy. But for Jehosheba, this moment was more than just the fulfillment of a plan, it was a testament to faith, courage, and the unwavering promises of the Lord. It was a culmination of years of sacrifice and secrecy, guided by her determination to protect the covenant of God. As Jehosheba stood in the quiet corners of the temple, she thought back to the night she had rescued Joash. The shadows of the palace corridors, the tense escape, the moments of doubt, all replayed in her mind. She remembered the weight of the infant in her arms, his fragile life hanging by a thread. It had been an act of desperation but also one of deep faith, a decision that had required her to risk everything for the sake of God's promise. She recalled the years in hiding, the constant vigilance required to shield Joash from Athaliah's wrath. Every sound outside the temple walls had been a potential threat, every moment an exercise in trust and patience. But through it all, Jehosheba had remained steadfast, her faith unshaken. The Lord had guided her steps, and his plan had prevailed. Jehosheba's actions had far-reaching consequences, extending beyond the immediate restoration of Judah's monarchy. By saving Joash and protecting the Davidic line, she had ensured the survival of God's covenant with his people, a covenant that would ultimately lead to the coming of the Messiah. Her bravery had preserved not only the future of Judah but also the lineage through which God's eternal plan of redemption would unfold. Yet Jehosheba did not seek recognition or glory. Her role had been one of quiet service, a testament to the power of faith over fear. She had acted not out of ambition but out of love for her people, her God, and the covenant that bound them together. Her story, though often overlooked, remained a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. Under Jehoiada's guidance, King Joash began the work of restoring Judah. The young king dismantled the altars of Baal and re-established the worship of the Lord, leading his people back to their faith. The temple, which had been a place of refuge during the years of hiding, now became the center of spiritual renewal for the kingdom. Though Joash was still a boy, his leadership reflected the wisdom and care imparted to him by Jehosheba and Jehoiada. He ruled with humility and a sense of divine purpose, his actions guided by the principles instilled in him during his formative years. The people of Judah rallied around their king, their trust in him fueled by their gratitude for his survival. Jehosheba watched Joash's reign unfold with quiet pride. Though her role in his life had shifted, she remained a steadfast presence in the background, offering her support and counsel when needed. She knew that her mission was not complete, for the work of restoration required ongoing dedication and faith. The story of Jehosheba and Joash was not merely one of human bravery, it was a testament to God's faithfulness and sovereignty. Despite Athaliah's attempts to erase the Davidic line, the Lord's plans had prevailed. He had used ordinary individuals, Jehosheba, Jehoiada, and even a child, to accomplish extraordinary purposes. Through their faith and courage, God had demonstrated that his promises could not be thwarted by the schemes of men. Jehosheba's quiet heroism served as a reminder that true strength often lies in acts of selflessness and service. Her unwavering trust in the Lord had enabled her to protect his covenant, preserving the hope of salvation for all generations. As Jehosheba reflected on her journey, she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her actions had been guided by the Lord, and she was content to have played her part in his plan. Though the celebrations of Judah's restoration faded with time, Jehoshaba's legacy endured. Her courage and faith were remembered as a shining example of what it means to serve the Lord wholeheartedly. The restoration of Judah under Joash marked the beginning of a new chapter for the kingdom, one filled with hope and promise. And at the heart of it all was Jehosheba, a woman whose quiet strength had changed the course of history. Jehoshaba's story is one of faith, bravery, and devotion, an inspiring tale of how one woman's quiet strength safeguarded the covenant of God. Through her courage, the Davidic line was preserved, ensuring the fulfillment of divine promises that would echo throughout history. Her actions remind us that even in the darkest times, God works through individuals who trust in Him wholeheartedly. Jehoshaba's legacy is not only a mark of personal sacrifice but a testament to the enduring power of faith and the sovereignty of God's plans. Thank you for joining me in this captivating journey through the story of Jehosheba, a woman whose bravery and faith preserved the future of a kingdom. Her actions resonate with timeless lessons about trust, courage, and God's unwavering promises. As you reflect on her story, consider the ways you can live out your own faith in moments of trial and uncertainty. If you loved uncovering the story of Jehosheba and her daring rescue, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more captivating tales from the Bible. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of the courage and faith that God instills in us. Let me know in the comments, what part of her story inspired you the most.